Good morning, everyone. This is Judith A. Cope. You're listening to Mad Love. Let's get into it. So, yesterday's weather was just beautiful here. St. Louis is not known for its beautiful temperatures. It's usually, we get a small amount of spring and a small amount of fall, and it just gets so unpleasant in between those things. But this year, we've really had a spring, and it's been lovely. We had a hot stretch, and I remember it because my brother was suffering. They wouldn't turn the air on in his senior building, and he was really struggling. So I bought him an air conditioner because his unit was just feeling like an oven. And he didn't use it very long, but I did keep him comfortable for his final few hours. But other than that, it's been really, really lovely. Great weather. So I realized that there's so many things I never talk about on this podcast, which is so fascinating to me because I feel like I am an open book. I share so many things, mainly the caregiving, because it just sort of took over my life. When I started this podcast, I was not a full-time caregiver, and I didn't talk about it very much. And my mom had started to interrupt me while I was recording in the mornings, and it was just small things like that I think were trying to let me know that this was going to be my life, but I wasn't figuring it out fast enough. And then caregiving just became the topic of everything I discussed. But one thing, I was watching something last night. I can't remember. We went out to dinner for one of my friend's birthdays, and I came home and I ate much later than I normally do. So I just found stuff to do, and I was finally putting things together and finishing up some paperwork, because that's another thing. When someone passes away, you will not believe the amount of paperwork, especially if they had stuff. You know, if they have cars, houses, bank accounts, checking accounts, CDs, you know, all these different things all over the place. Not music CDs. He had a ton of those, but like CD bank assets. You know, it's just like, and you can forget. There's so many little moving pieces, so you forget to do these things. And so I was wrapping some stuff up, and I was sitting here, and then I started to think about, for some reason, I started to think about why my script that I love so much, that everybody who's read it, they can see it in their brains after they read it. They feel like it's a movie already. They loved it. And I had a lot of attention on it in the 90s, in the mid 90s, but no one would give us the money to produce it. And I started to think, you know, so much about my journey into film almost has nothing to do with talent. And I look at all these other people, like so many of these people happen to be talented, but I don't think they got chosen because they were talented. You know, and the more I read about how the CIA has its hand in the entertainment industry, which sounds so preposterous, but it makes sense because they sold us on the idea that we were a free country. We didn't do propaganda. You could have freedom of speech. But the gatekeeping was so intense in filmmaking. This is what I'm thinking about at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock last night. And I'm like, the gatekeeping was so intense. It's almost like I missed my window. Because in the stretch I'm talking about, we had Spike Lee, and he is a storyteller like no other. I don't happen to tell stories the way he does. Just like Tyler Perry, I'm not really interested in the way he tells stories. I'm a different type of writer, but I always assumed it was a place for me at the table because in my mind it was democratic. There was a meritocracy. You know, like if you're a good writer, you'll get a shot. But I don't think that's the case now. And I'm not making excuses for me. I'm talking about a whole bunch of people who never got a chance, and they've got talent and they just don't get a shot. And I never understood it. And then I started hearing the Me Too stories about 10 years ago. And then you say, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. I was just pitching my screenplay. I never, ever thought that I had to like do something other than take the meeting and talk about my script to get the work done. But then it goes even deeper than that, because in the window I'm talking about, it was Spike Lee, then came John Singleton, then came all those hood movies, like Jason's Lyric and gosh, I can't even think of all Sugar Hill. It was all these gangster movies. And then like almost by accident you got Love Jones. But you had Love Jones, Love and Basketball, Brown Sugar, and I want to say that then that genre just disappeared. The love story with black people disappeared, and then I started thinking, well, that makes sense. It doesn't make sense, but it does make sense because the gatekeeping did not want that to continue. They were super happy with the gangster film, and some of those portrayals continued, and then they kind of had a stretch with the black savior, because that was Lean on Me. Then they moved the savior to the white person. That was Dangerous Minds. And then after they kind of let those few love stories sneak in, I guess you could include how Stella got her groove back in that era. There were black films, but the love story really disappeared. It was almost like they did not want black people to procreate, which I know sounds crazy because plenty of us do, but I'm just saying, it was like the propaganda machine. If you look at it, there was even a film company called Propaganda Films. And when you look at it, you think, okay, if there is this group that doesn't want people to feel empowered, that doesn't want a certain group of people to have a voice, you could see they'd be like, okay, enough of those. And then in the 2000s, think about it, they went hard slave movie. I mean, there were so many slavery movies, and it was like, you know what? Slavery movies and period pieces. And I just put my foot down. I'm like, I'm not watching these. 12 Years a Slave was the last slave movie. I was like, this is just ridiculous. It's starting to be insulting because we're still here. We're still alive. Black people are living contemporary lives. We can't tell love stories, but we can show us being slaves or hidden figures. And it's like, but we're still alive. So what about those stories? And then Black Panther snuck in there and changed the game financially for a minute, but only because it was supernatural or superhero. It wasn't realistic. It was aspirational. But if anybody really thought some black man had that kind of power, and then unfortunately Chadwick got sick, and I mean, it wasn't gonna last. I'm telling you, I'm not big on like conspiracy theories. I mean, I'm getting more and more into them because they're turning out to not be just theories. But if you read about the history of the CIA and their involvement with music and movies, you start to realize that there is something to this. And like I said, I'm not making excuses because I didn't become a huge film star. Well, I didn't want to be in the movies. I wanted to direct them. But when I did my internship, I realized that it really wasn't a meritocracy, and it really wasn't democratic, and it was not diverse. I worked on the Warner lot for about 3 months. Well, I worked at Warner Brothers I interned at Warner Brothers for 3 months, and I had 2 weeks on the lot. Because I was like, why? I'm a film major. Why are you got me over here, in international TV distribution? So what I did in that office was I photocopied a lot of scripts and sent them to Bahrain and Saudi Arabia and all around the world to see what they would cut out before they could show a Warner, movie. And so what I did do is every time I make a copy for Bahrain, I put one in my bag. Make a copy for Saudi Arabia, put one in my bag. So I would go home and I'd study these scripts because I didn't have a TV for a long time. I think I finally got a TV when my mom came to visit me. But I didn't have a TV. I was sleeping on the floor. I didn't have furniture, but I got a TV and a rental bed for my mom. And it was wild. I was teaching myself how to write scripts by reading scripts every night because I didn't really have anything else to do. And, it's just so sad to me that person who was so eager and so excited to be a part of this industry that looked so, it never really looked welcoming, but it looked like it was a possibility. And then you get up in it and you realize, oh, there was never really a chance. You had to know somebody and you had to be censored. None of those people who are making studio flicks have freedom. I mean, I saw something the other day about Steven Spielberg. He made a movie called Munich, which I never watched. But apparently, he had a sentiment in there that was almost, kind to the Palestinians, and it sounded like he really got in trouble for that. Like people really felt some kind of way about him doing that. But yeah, I mean, this is not a tamper-free environment. We are heavily controlled and heavily manipulated. We just don't know it. And I think people are starting to wake up. I think people are starting to realize that we've been controlled by forces known and unknown. Things that, we were taught in school that were the complete opposite in reality. And, I don't know. It's very frustrating because I still want to make movies. I just want to be free to create good art, and they just find all kinds of ways to keep you from being able to tell the stories you want to tell. So anyway, to share what I'm thinking, my story is called Adore. It was written based off of the Prince song Adore. And I had a couple of versions that weren't great, but by the time I graduated college, I settled on a version that I wrote in 1992 while my parents left me alone long enough to write every day. And people love that script. They really do. And I love the script. And it's just odd to me, now that I look back, I'm like, I get it now. Like it would have hit a little different, I think it would have. It was sort of like, you remember how Eddie Murphy made Boomerang? And like a lot of white people did not like it. I read a critic's story, I want to say in the New York Times, and he was like, what kind of world is this where no white people exist? It's just black people. And I'm like, see, this is wild to me because those worlds do exist and they're educated and they have money and they do not want to be around white people. Those worlds exist. And the risk of the biggest film star in the world at that time, making these kinds of movies, if you notice, he didn't do anything remotely close or as funny as Boomerang Again. And that was a love story. And then you kind of got Love Jones. Like I said, I think Ted Witcher just snuck in there and did an indie, and it was something different. And they were like, okay, we can let this get through. And then you got Love and Basketball. But after, and like I said, Brown Sugar was in there and a few others, because I know Taye Diggs was in a few. But like it really just dried up. And to be fair, all romantic comedies dried up. If you think about it, Julia Roberts, nor Meg Ryan, nor Cameron Diaz, none of those people would have careers if they started in 2026, because nobody's in love anymore. Everybody's mad and angry, and the movies are all cartoon characters or comic book people or some other shit. So I don't know. I feel like there has been this iron fist over our entertainment, and it's been a huge gatekeeper. And I think this is my most outrageous claim, but I think they let the N-word be a part of everything on purpose, because I think simply white people wanted to be able to say it. There was somebody, because when I remember when rap started, it was heavily censored and people didn't say the N-word at all. You couldn't say it. And then it showed up with NWA, and they saw how much money they can make by saying it and putting it in every record. And I think they also, white people just wanted to be able to say it. You know, there was probably somebody who was like, you know what, let's unleash this word. It's not a compliment, and I don't care what anybody says. The N-word is never a term of endearment. And it's not a word I like. It's not a word I use. And I think flooding the Black community with that word, and then white people loving our music and taking over the culture, flooding it with that word, it was more effective than crack. Because it's just like now everybody uses it all the time. And I don't care what you say. A slur is a slur. And I think that was done on purpose too. And I know it sounds crazy. I feel crazy saying it, but I really do. I can see why things have gone the way they've gone. And then it was the gateway to like hating women, you know, because there's been a sustained attack against women in American culture, I would say for at least the last 20 years. But think about it. We'll use CBS as an example. I've said this before. CBS went from the network of Ann Romano from One Day at a Time, Alice from Alice, Murphy Brown, Designing Women, these strong, Margaret Hot Lips Houlihan from MASH, these strong, outspoken women, the women of WKRP in Cincinnati. They went from these strong, well-defined, independent, interesting women, Mary Tyler Moore, the Mary Tyler Moore Show, to Charlie Sheen and NCIS and CSI. Everything became procedural and overly masculine, hyper masculine, you know, and it was like, what was the point of that? You know, it's almost like, let's tamp these women back into their places, you know, and same with people of color. Let's put these people of color back in their places, you know, and I feel that. I mean, you can look at it. If you're a student of this entertainment industry like I am, you can see it. The pattern is there. And what's sad is, you know, we all just sort of fell for it. And how did we get out of it? You know, I don't think anybody who makes real movies is gonna be famous anymore, because you're gonna have to fund your own film to tell it the way you want to tell it. And you'll be able to distribute it, but you won't be famous, that's for sure. I think the same is coming for music. If you want to make the music you want to make and not be manipulated and not be extorted in these contracts and possibly harmed just because you wanted to make some music, you'll probably not have a huge fan base, but you'll be making the music you want to make. And there'll be some value in that. You're not going to get rich, though. But, you know, I think if you want to be creative, you're just going to have to take some chances and do it on your own, because anything else, you're subject to get sold out and bought out, and they're going to control you and do shitty things with your art. And they're going to gatekeep. I mean, anyway, I think my script is great. If you guys ever want to read it, let me know. I'll link it somewhere so people can at least read the script. I probably should look at it. I haven't looked at it in a while. But yeah, I don't understand how this has been going on so long without us noticing. But the brainwashing is ending, and I guess we're paying attention. So anyway, be careful what you put in your brain. Everybody behind it is not trying to enhance you or help you or improve your life in any way. Some of this stuff has been a psyop. Some of this stuff has been to keep you in your place. You cannot tell me that's not what they wanted to do with all these fucking slave movies. I mean, for real. Slave movies and period pieces. As if the subtle messages, you're not going to be a part of the future. Damn. Have a good day.